Hi, this is Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop, and I'm kind of getting lost here. But what I want to do in this video is talk about this baritone Strat conversion. So this is a student grade Strat that I have converted to play as a baritone guitar. I really like getting student Strats in because I love doing cool stuff with them. Strats are a great platform for just playing around with all sorts of stuff because they're extremely modular guitars, and so you can start off with, you know, a neck and a body that's not necessarily anything special, but you can do a lot of really cool things with it depending on, you know, what kind of, you know, crazy stuff that you have in mind. One of the things that I love doing with Strats, because they have a 25.5-inch scale generally, I can kind of just eke in a baritone that'll intonate properly and play properly out of one of these guitars typically because of that 25.5-inch scale. And so that's the thing that I love doing. A baritone guitar is just like a regular guitar. Tuning, the intervals are all the same, but you're tuned a little bit lower. And so instead of E to E, this guitar here is tuned B to B, which lets you get some of those super cool low lead runs that you're familiar with from some songs like the ones that I was playing, which were Rebel Rouser by Dwayne Eddy and Rock Lobster by the B-52s. So it's a really cool kind of unique sound that you can put in recordings or performances to just kind of spice things up, because baritone guitars aren't all that common. There aren't a hell of a lot of bands out there using it, though it's definitely a sound that you've heard before because it sounds cool. So basically what happened with the modification is that some modifications were made to the bridge to allow me to intonate this guitar, because these won't normally take a B2B tuning with baritone strings and let me intonate correctly. And the nut also had to be swapped out. And in this case, I swapped out the nut on this guitar for camel bone. And if you're not familiar with the difference a bone nut can make to a guitar, I strongly recommend doing some reading on that because it's kind of a big deal. Camel bone happens to be one of the more kind of sought after materials for doing it because it's hard and it's very pretty. And so this nut will improve tone and also improve tuning and some other things. So some other things that happened with this guitar, I wanted to play around with the electronics. I love playing around with the electronics on Strat. Strats, there's just so much to work with here. I've got 3 pickups, I've got all these controls, I've got all this room in here if I want to add my own switches. And so a couple of things that I did with this particular guitar were to add a phase switch to the middle pickup and add a on-off phase switch to the neck pickup. Let me explain what both of those are and why I did it. So first let's talk about that middle pickup. Strats in the old days had a 3-way switch. We're talking like 1950s, early 60s Strats here. Had a 3-way switch and 3 pickups that were all the same polarity. And so when you were playing a Strat back in those days, you basically had the choice of, you know, pickup 1, pickup 2, pickup 3, but none of the in-between settings that we're used to on modern Strats. The thing is that some players found that you could actually catch the switch in between those settings and get those and get both pickups at once. And you could do that by shoving a matchstick in there or, you know, other trickery to get that switch to stay. But the sound that they got back then was not the same as that in-between sound that we get now. And the reason is because that middle pickup was the same polarity, same phase as the pickup next to it. And so what you got was kind of the out of phase humbucker sound. If you've had a phase switch installed in a humbucker, you kind of can know what that is. It's kind of a little bit more nasally, a little bit more piercing. Sounds really cool for doing lead work, especially in stuff like surf rock and rockabilly. it's just kind of a cool sound. I like to do a lot of 1960s covers and 1950s covers, and so to me that's a really important sound to have. I think that all Strats should probably come with that option personally, but you know, other people can have different opinions about stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and play through and play through those settings both on the modern and the switched kind of vintage setting. So this is what the standard, you know, modern in between the bridge and middle sound like. And then when we pop that phase switch, bit of a different flavor. But you can get the same modern and vintage in between setting on the neck and the middle pickup as well. So this would be the modern setting, and this would be the vintage setting. So you may never use those, but you have the option with this guitar if you wanted to use those to use them. The next switch that I installed was a on-off phase switch. Now the thing is that if you turn on both the bridge and the neck pickup on a Strat typically together, it does some weird phase stuff, and you're not actually getting like a humbucker sound. It's not actually like a two pickups that are necessarily designed to go together like they would be on a Telecaster, you know, or a two pickup guitar where that would normally be the case. And so in order to have both of those on and kind of have a more standardish tone, what needs to happen is that there needs to be an on-off switch, as well as a thing to turn that neck pickup around so that it's actually a humbucking setting when engaged with the bridge pickup. So with the pickup selector all the way down into the bridge pickup, if we pop this guy here, we now have a neck and bridge pickup setting that's normally not accessible on a Stratocaster. Pretty cool, because it's kind of like duosonic a little bit. It's a really cool kind of offset Fender sound that you're not normally able to get with a Strat, and here it is. So something else that switch enables you to do, which is kind of cool, is that you're able to turn on all three pickups at the same time, which is kind of a cool thing to, like, well, at least when I was 12 and I first got my Strat, that's what I really wanted to hear. Like, I sat for hours trying to figure out how to make it do that. And I just thought that would be such a cool sound, because you've got like all this surface area that must sound really cool, right? I mean, it sounds a little wonky because again, it's not a setting that the pickups are necessarily designed to do, and so it is a little bit of out of phase stuff going on, but it is kind of a neat tone, and so I'm going to show you what that sounds like as well. And the way that we get that tone on this guitar is to go up into the in-between bridge and middle setting, and to then engage that on-off switch for the neck. And so this is all three pickups at the same time. Pretty cool sound. Like, it's really rich, just nice. I could definitely see using that for recording, using that in a show. Really, really nice sound. Some other things that have gone on in this guitar to just kind of knock it number of notches above stock are that the pickup cavity, the electronics cavity and pickup cavities in here have been shielded to prevent EM interference. So this is a very, very quiet Strat. Normally Strats are kind of noisy guitars. This one is very, very quiet, especially for being a more student grade guitar. Which is really, really cool. I can turn on sources of EM in here, like I have a light back here that just loves to produce EM that bothers guitars. It's a really good diagnostic tool, by the way. That doesn't bother this guitar so much. So that's happened. I've also installed orange drop tone capacitors, which is kind of a cool modification. Orange drops differ from the little green caps and little ceramic disc caps in that they're actually designed to work in audio circuits. They're shielded, and incidentally, that shielding needs to be installed in the right orientation in order for that to really work. But they actually produce a tone cut that's a little bit more pleasant and fuzzy and warm, rather than kind of muddy and nasally, which is kind of the tone that I'm used to getting from those green caps or the ceramic disc caps. So to me, it's the difference between a tone knob that you use a lot or a tone knob that you don't use at all, because it doesn't do anything good. So I'm just going to show you what the roll-off on that sounds like. This is the roll-off on the middle pickup. There is no tone adjustment on a Strat typically for the bridge pickup, but there are modifications that you can do to get that. Anyway, so let's hear what that tone roll-off sounds like on that middle pickup. So that's going all the way down. A lot of variation and color that goes into that's kind of nice to have. I'll show you what that roll off sounds like on the neck pickup as well. So diving that all the way down. Basically what the tone knobs on a typical guitar do is that they're a low pass filter, and so you're bleeding off high frequencies and letting low frequencies pass. These just do it in kind of a nicer way that produces a much more pleasing effect, in my opinion, than some other caps. Some other cool things that happened during the baritone conversion. I have to replace the nut. The nut on this guitar has been replaced with camel bone, which is pretty cool. It's a nice hard material. It looks gorgeous. It's a little bit more yellowy and pearlesque than like cattle bone or some other bones that I've used before. And I've also added roller trees to this guitar to help cut down on friction. And that's also been carved in such a way that it cuts down on friction. And part of the reason I did that is because I just love, again, having a tremolo on a baritone. The tremolo on this guitar has been set up to float. There are 3 ways that you can usually set up a Strat tremolo system. One of those is to lay it down flat, which is what you usually find on like Fender Squiers and student guitars, out of the box. The reason that they do that is because it's a little bit easier to keep in tune, and it's just less things to worry about. Generally, the assumption is with like a Squier or a student Strat is that you're giving it to a kid, and it generally somebody who's a student, and having to worry about tremolo issues is just one more thing that they don't have to worry about in the case that trem is set down flat. But I know a lot of experienced players that love having it set that way too, because some people just don't use it that often. And setting it down flat enables you to use it in one direction to slack the notes without the tuning issues that you can run into with a floating trem. A floating trem is how it was engineered to set up, which is that there's a delicate balance between the tension on the strings and the tension on the springs in the back of the guitar that hold that tremolo block down. And balancing those tensions, you're able to get it to the point where it's actually lifted a little bit, and you can get both directions of travel out of that trem. And that's what I've done here, so that you can get these cool surf rock flutters. You can't get that effect if the tremolo is laid down flat, but I mean, it's a really cool effect to have. And on the note of tremolos, I have one other cool thing that I did with this guitar that, again, may or may not be a thing that you end up using, but it's a thing that you have the option of using, because I'm going to give it to you anyway if you buy the guitar, unless you really yell at me and tell me that you don't want it. I'm a finger picker, and there are a number of other guitar players who I listen to frequently who also use their fingers to play a lot. One of those players happens to be David Gilmour of Pink Floyd. And I noticed something watching David play a number of years ago, which is that he holds the tremolo arm in his hand, and I do the same thing. And the thing that's always bugged me is that with a standard length tremolo, you're always playing like up at the neck when you do that. And I noticed that he wasn't. And then I did some reading and found out that he had actually modified the tremolo arm in his guitar to be about 4 1/4 inches long. And that enables you to hold the tremolo arm in your hand while you play, and still keep good control of what you're doing with that. And that's it's such a cool modification that I immediately made one for my own Strat. And one of the hottest items on my reverb page is I actually love getting in just big, huge batches of Squier tremolo arms and just creating these shortened trem arms for Squiers, because, there are a lot of players out there who have Squiers or guitars with tremolos that take that same thread, and there just aren't a lot of people producing them. So I think it's a really cool thing. And, it's here if you want to use it, and it's not necessary to use if you don't want to. So anyway, this is a pretty cool guitar, I think. The reason that I decided to go through all this effort with this thing is just that it's just a really cool Strat that's solid white. There's just something about that look, and the yellow in here is not fake. This is actually naturally aged this way. If you pop the pick guard off, you see that it's stark white underneath, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I thought that this was an aesthetically pleasing instrument, and I thought it was worth kind of doing some neat things with. Incidentally, some other stuff that's been done to this, on top of everything that's been talked about, is that the frets have been reworked. And so even though it's a student grade guitar, the frets on here are definitely no longer student grade. I'm very, very meticulous about my fretwork. I've done a lot of fretwork. They're shiny, they're level, they are well-rounded and just a great playing surface, and so you won't have any issues with the setup, the frets, or any of the stuff that you normally kind of pull your hair out at with student guitars. So this is a pretty neat rig. Definitely far beyond stock. This is more of kind of a Franken Strat at this point. It's a project guitar. It's a cool chassis that a lot of hot rodding has been done to. So I have this up for sale on Reverb, if the link is still active, and if you're in the Seattle area, maybe you could just give me a call and come and take a look at it and play it yourself and see what you think. There's a gig bag that comes with this, if that matters, and I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover on this guitar. So thank you so much for spending all this time with me in this video and checking out this instrument that I've been working on for the last few days. And there's a link to my website in the description, as well as, if you want to check out everything else on my channel, you can go there and check out my vids. I have a lot of tutorials, and I have a lot of weird geeky guitar projects that I love doing. So again, thank you for watching. This has been Drew Jones of Drew's Guitar Shop in Seattle, Washington. Have a great one.